Hello everyone, I'm Jen and I make useful English lit study videos on Shakespeare, poetry, fiction, literary ideas and more to help you become a literary expert. So if that sounds like what you need, make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you never miss out on my weekly videos. So in today's video, we are looking at the 3 key symbols in Henrik Ibsen's play A Doll's House. And before we get to what they are, I just want to clarify what symbolism means in the context of literary analysis, because I find a lot of students confuse this with other devices like metaphor and personification, whatever. So a symbol is often something that is tangible, representing an abstract idea. So for example, the flexed bicep is a symbol of strength. The rose is a symbol of romance, and red, the color, can be a symbol of passion. So this tangible thing can be a concrete object, but it can also take the form of whatever's visible to the eye, like a color, red, or an action, flexing. So compared to poetry and novels, symbolism in drama can be especially impactful because the medium itself is so much more visual, which means that every time a symbol appears in the text, it should also literally appear before the audience's eyes, reinforcing its presence and significance in our minds. This is why symbolism is such an important technique in dramatic analysis. So in A Doll's House, the 3 most prominent symbols, I think, are the macaroons that Nora sneakily eats behind her husband's back, the tarantella dance that she performs at their neighbour's fancy dress ball, and the letters by Torvald and Krogstad. Now, while each symbol provides us with a unique insight into Nora's psyche and identity, together they chart a trajectory of Nora's psychological shift throughout the play, from initially fearing her husband's disapproval at every turn, to gradually subverting against his patriarchal bind on her freedom, to eventually breaking away from the strictures of social and moral conventions imposed upon her as a woman. So, with that, let's now dive straight into each of these symbols to explore how they shed light on Ibsen's characterization and themes. Now, one of the most intriguing things about this play, I find, is Nora's sweet tooth and her weakness for macaroons. Torvald doesn't approve of her eating them, but of course she still does, and just lies about it afterwards. Now, this happens right at the start of Act 1, when the stage directions indicate that Nora takes a packet of macaroons from her pocket and eats 1 or 2, then goes cautiously to her husband's door and listens to see if he's in the study before she enters to ask him for money. At the point before Torvald opens the door, she puts the bag of macaroons into her pocket and wipes her mouth. And the clandestine nature of her act suggests that there's a degree of deceit, or at least lack of transparency, in the Helmer's marriage. The wife cannot be her true self in front of her husband, and must hide from him even a relatively harmless act as eating a macaroon, although perhaps it's because it's a rather expensive treat and she doesn't want him to tell her off for being a spendthrift. But this foreshadows the greater, more problematic secret that she has hidden from him about her forgery of her father's signature in order to obtain the loan for her husband's medical treatment. So a common interpretation, and what I think is a valid one too, is that Nora's sneaky consumption of macaroons symbolizes her inherently defiant nature. But I'd actually argue that it's the very act of consuming these macaroons which bolsters her will to defy against her husband eventually, which is also why we see her eating them first before entering Torvald's study, as if the macaroons and the sugar rush they offer her embolden her with the courage required to ask for what she needs. On this point, it's worth considering the history of macaroons, which were apparently popularized by 2 Carmelite nuns who had sought asylum during the French Revolution, as they sold macaroons on the streets to pay for their rent. So there's an interesting and perhaps coincidental parallel between the nuns' situation back in the French Revolution and Nora's eventual decision to leave the Helmer household as her own gesture of revolt against stifling domesticity, after which she would most likely have to seek her own form of asylum as a social pariah who has shunned her duties and roles as mother and wife. By the way, guys, if you find this video helpful so far, I'd massively appreciate it if you could hit the thumbs up button below and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on any of my top grade lit study content going forward. I'd also encourage you to check out my membership program by clicking the join button below if you want exclusive access to members only study content and make special video requests. I'll see you there. So the macaroons then don't just symbolize Nora's desire to revolt, but equally they represent how even the smallest Defiant gestures like consuming a treat in secret can imbue an individual with a greater sense of agency and power to pursue their own wants and needs. Alternatively, the nature of the macaroons as a dessert that's overwhelmingly sweet in the instant but is airy and hollow within also bears similarity with the nature of the Helmer's marriage, which is characterized largely by superficial sweet talk between Torvald and Nora, but with little emotional depth or real connection at its core. As Nora confronts her husband at the end of the play, in all these 8 years, from the very beginning of our acquaintance, we have never exchanged a word on any serious subject, never sat down in earnest together to try and get at the bottom of anything. Now, the tarantella is a form of dance that originates from southern Italy and is marked by a fast, upbeat tempo which can be performed by two people or an individual depending on whether the purpose is courtship or cure from the bite of the poisonous tarantula spider. Now, Ibsen pays homage to the Italian roots of this dance by having Nora learn the tarantula in Capri, Italy, which also happens to be the point in the Helmer's marriage when Torvald took a rehabilitation sabbatical from overwork stress. And of course, it's also the point when Nora made the fateful decision of forging her father's signature in order to acquire the loan money for her husband's treatment. What's ironic, though, is that while Nora had learned the tarantula dance herself and ultimately performs it in such a passionate, liberated, and individually distinct way, which suggests that the tarantula symbolizes a kind of personal emancipation for her, Torvald is the one who requests that she dances it at the Stenborg's ball, but in the guise of this Neapolitan fisher girl under his paternalistic coaching. So the most symbolic moment regarding the tarantula comes towards the end of Act 2, when Nora requests a rehearsal with her husband, who plays the piano accompaniment to Nora's performance and offers her technical critique, as per her request. But instead of accepting his feedback to slow down and dance less violently, Nora performs with a kind of passionate, fiery abandon that resists the cues or instructions of her husband's coaching. Indeed, the way she dances as if she doesn't seem to hear him, her hair coming down and falling over her shoulders, which she pays no attention to, but goes on dancing, and later, as Mrs. Lynde points out in Fascination, "You are dancing as if your life depended on it," but which Torvald remarks as sheer madness. All of this suggests that Nora isn't performing the courtship type of tarantula which Torvald expects, but rather the convulsive, curative form of the dance which was traditionally performed only by victims of the poisonous spider bite that sought to purge their bodies of the poisonous substance. So we can read Nora's violent solo tarantula performance as this foreshadowing of her ultimate liberation from the Helmer household, and her vigorous movements are her way of expelling the poison of social conformity and stifling moralism from her existence, as she ultimately realizes that she can no longer live in a way that is false to her true self. What's also significant is that Torvald's absence from the dance signals the lack of true partnership and chemistry between him and his wife. He is only ever in the position of a coach, as during the rehearsal, or voyeur at the ball, which encapsulates the nature of his marriage with Nora, as someone who either critiques his wife's behavior for faults or objectifies his wife as the seductive siren, rather than ever viewing her as a whole, complex person that he can engage with on an even keel. The most prominent motif in the play is arguably the letter, and there are multiple letters in the play. There's the one that Torvald writes as his dismissal of Krogstad from his bank position, and then there is Krogstad's first letter to Torvald in which he reveals the truth about how Nora had acquired the loan through illegal means, and his second and final letter to Torvald when he relents and sends back Nora's bond. On the one hand, the letter functions as a lever of power between characters, and as a means by which Torvald can dictate the professional career and livelihood of a junior bank staff like Krogstad, and through which Krogstad can tarnish the social reputation of the Helmers by exposing Nora's forgery. So as a dramatic device, the letter serves to hike up the emotional intensity and sense of anticipation every time a character mentions it, because the reading of the letter's contents is what propels the action towards the climax, whether it be Krogstad's reading of Torvald's decision to dismiss him from the bank and thus be potentially enraged to expose Nora's crime, or as it eventually does happen, Torvald's reading of Krogstad's first letter when he realizes what his wife has done to jeopardize his social standing. So either way, the reading of the letter is what will eventually lead to the unraveling of the characters' relationships, and most significantly, the unraveling and disintegration of the Helmer's marriage. What's ironic is that while a letter is supposed to be a medium of communication between two parties, it's instead a constant source of tension between Nora and Torvald, with her trying desperately to convince him not to mail his dismissal letter and then later not to read Krogstad's letter, and his ultimate reading of Krogstad's letter resulting in their marital disintegration. On a broader symbolic level then, the Helmer's marriage could be viewed as an unread letter containing a devastating yet cathartic truth. The unreadness of their marriage being the fundamental lack of understanding between husband and wife, despite surface pleasantries exchanged on the daily, and the devastating cathartic truth being precisely that, which Nora exposes at the end of the play. So the great expose in this play, then, isn't Nora's forgery, as Krogstad details in his first letter, but rather that uncomfortable truth about the superficiality of the Helmer's 8-year marriage, Nora's loss of self under Torvald's paternalistic protection, and most tragically, the absence of real love and communication between husband and wife at the expense of keeping up with the Jonases by upholding this image of a seemingly happy bourgeois family. So when Torvald tears up the bond and both letters and throws them all into the stove and watches them burn, this symbolic act is what finally liberates both husband and wife from any need of further pretense, as they recognize that all hope of communication and reconciliation is gone. But instead of seeing this as a definitive tragedy, perhaps Nora's departure is, in Torvald's final words and in Nora's words throughout the play, the most wonderful thing of all. Because at least the pressure cooker on hiding the truth about their marriage is now let off, and the two of them are finally free to exist as individuals, untethered from each other to pursue and live out their true self-identities. And there you have it, guys. That's my analysis of the 3 most important symbols in A Doll's House. Are there any other symbols that you find interesting in the play, and what other interpretations might you have about the ones that I've shared? Comment below to let me know, and also for others to weigh in on, and so we can get a discussion going. So for your next video, I recommend that you watch my analysis of Nora's characterization, which is going to give you even more insights into her psyche and personality for a deeper understanding of the symbols and the other characters mentioned in this video. And as always, hit that thumbs up button below if you found this video helpful in any way, so that YouTube will know to spread it to more passionate lit learners like yourself all around the world, and that you can encourage me to keep making these study videos for you. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and switch on that bell notification so you never miss out on my future weekly videos. You can also consider joining my membership program for exclusive video requests and essay review perks. Click that join button below to find out more. Thanks for watching as always, and I will see you in the next one.